big ball worth, full of mirth since its birth. It's the cheapest buy on earth.
I bid 50.
50 is the bid, I'll die. Me, oh my, don't be shy. Folks, the limit is the sky.
I bid 40.
40 is the bid so far. Park your car where you are. Hitch your wagon to a star.
I'll bid 20.
20 is bid.
Yeah.
Going. Gone.
I got them the whole world time got.
Gimme.
Oh, the money, huh?
The cash.
Here you got a few.
Thank you.
So what is here, what? I'll pull gravity out of the height and see what happens.
Yes, guys, welcome back to this week's episode, and today we'll be dissecting the real matrix of this world. Two planets in the sky, Saturn and the Moon. This is the Saturn-Moon Matrix, and let's just get started really with a bit of football. So for any football fans, you may be thinking what I'm saying has perhaps nothing to do with the Saturn-Moon Matrix, but it is really. The two best players in the world, Ronaldo and Messi. Look into their astrology. We start with Ronaldo, right? Obviously, he had his birthday recently on Sunday. Happy birthday to the man. But he's an Aquarian, an Aquarius, and funnily enough, that's the age you're in. And Aquarius traditionally was ruled by Saturn. Now, in the New Age, they say Uranus. I mean, that's quite funny, really, because in Greek mythology, obviously, the father of Saturn is Uranus, but Aquarius being ruled by Saturn, and we know Saturn is Satan, and he obviously played for the Red Devils twice. And then you go to his counterpart, Lionel Messi. He's born on the 24th of June, which is in the sign of Cancer, and Cancer is ruled by the Moon. So there you see the polarity of the Saturn-Moon Matrix within those two players. And Rowan, obviously, I think it was earlier this season when he was still at Man United, Ronaldo, the death of his child occurred, and of course it's been sad. But how can we relate this to mythology? In Roman and Greek mythology, Saturn, or as the Greeks called Kronos, would eat his children. The symbology there is very, very crazy. And of course, when you look into football as well, Saturn has what's termed as magic squares. So each planet has a magic square, and Saturn's is 45, which just happens to match the half of a football match. So it does seem and stems that Saturn, well, football is based around Saturn, just as most things are in this reality.
Yeah, very cool. What did you say about that? The half? What do you mean by the half of Saturn?
Like basically, Saturn's magic square, when you add all the numbers, it equals 45. So it's 1 to 9, and obviously the first 9 triangular numbers add to 45. And that's obviously matching to how long a half of football is, 45 minutes.
What do you mean by the magic square? Sorry, I'm a bit unfamiliar with that.
Yeah, so each planet has a magic square, and I believe there's some Hebrew where you connect the numbers together. I'll put a visual on it now because it is a new one for me. Like I remember, I got first watched a Logan video about the magic square. He showed the magic square of the sun, where all the digits add up to the great number 666.
Oh, I think I know what you mean. Is it like about the orbit and stuff like that? And the different phases of the planet?
Not necessarily, but it could be that.
Right, okay. Because that's seemingly what I remember from like last year when he showed that the sun's phase is equated to 666, I think.
Yeah, it's that exactly.
Right, okay. So you're saying all planets have something like that, and the one for the Saturn equals 45. That's very interesting. I didn't realise that. It's very cool. Obviously, Saturn having the rings as well. I think the rings are quite significant. A lot of people would just say it's like dust particles and things that surround the planet. But I think it signifies something a bit deeper. Obviously, like you can say that represented in our real life in the modern world with things like marriage, where you have the wedding rings, which is like representative of the ring of Saturn almost, and you have party rings as well. Party rings are a very nice snack. If you ever had a party ring before. But yeah. So obviously, like there's reference to the rings of Saturn and things like that in modern life, things with marriage. It's like almost you're giving your allegiance to Saturn and the reality when you're joining a unity with someone else in the form of marriage.
Like even the case of sport again with boxing, right? You're in the box, the cube, which we're only a touch on. But obviously, boxing, where did they fight? They fight in the ring.
Yeah.
More allegiance to Saturn.
Yeah.
So, funnily enough, as I touched on boxing, you want to talk about the cube?
Yeah. So, for those who aren't familiar, there's a theory. I believe it was proposed by Nick Hinton. However, the knowledge probably stems further back than. Essentially, if you look at Saturn, there appears to be a cube. If you look at the storm of Saturn, there's a storm on Saturn, which people seem to argue is ancient technology, AI, and that's what's creating the storm essentially. That seems to be going on just forever, just constantly. But basically, if you take all sides of that storm, because the storm looks like a hexagon essentially, and if you join all the points of the storm, it looks like a cube. So people believe that is a cube on Saturn essentially. And the theory is that our reality is derived from that storm. If you look into a lot of modern media and things like that, you'll see reference to the cube. So you've got things like the Mecca, where people walk around constantly as like a form of ritual. And that's a giant black cube. You have things in modern media such as the Tesseract in Avengers. You have the cubes in the Justice League. And all of them seem to have a lot of links and reference to space-time and reality. They are almost like the governing functions of reality. Also in the UN, there's a meditation room, a prayer room, and inside the prayer room there's a black cube, which is quite interesting. So a lot of it's very strange, very strange. I don't really know what their reasoning for that is. Also as well, in terms of the hexagon, there is CERN. If you look at the machine of CERN, it's shaped like a hexagon, similar to the hexagon storm on Saturn. And if for people who aren't aware what CERN is, it's essentially where in Sweden, there's a science base where they basically smash particles together and they're trying to discover different particles. It's where they discovered things like the Higgs boson, and which is essentially the God particle, I believe. But yeah, there's reference to things like the CERN machine in other modern medias, like the film Spider-Verse, in which they travel between different universes and bring universes together, which is like the Spider-Man film that came out about 5 years ago. And it does have the potential to destroy reality and morph reality into a different sort of scope and spec of what it could possibly be. But yeah, essentially the Saturn time cube theory is basically a relative of the Saturn-Moon Matrix theory, because it suggests that Saturn is essentially the governing body of this reality, and it's where this reality is enclosed. It's enclosed within a cube, essentially. It's almost like a computer program, and that is where the simulation is created from. Also, you have celebrations, like ancient celebrations going back a few hundred years, such as Saturnalia, where they worship Satan as a god or a deity, and reference to, obviously, Saturn sounds a lot like Satan as well. So Saturnalia, funnily enough, was also celebrated at a very similar time to Christmas. So the idea is that essentially that celebration, that holiday, was basically co-opted and changed to Christmas to mask over the fact that we're still celebrating Saturnalia. And you have the idea that we're still celebrating that actual event through things like the pine tree, which we use as a Christmas tree, and the pine being representative of the third eye chakra, and Saturn obviously being the sixth planet from the sun, and how that is essentially like the cone of our reality, of our brains, basically. And there's tons of different ideas relating to Saturn, going back as far as years on years. It's also similar to how we call those running the Matrix. We like also associate them with being the elites. We call them the elites. So L is also a name for Saturn, and then we tend to put L in front of a lot of names for things like elites.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Yeah. So it's like the things governing this reality are the elites. That's possibly why we call them that. It's given them the power of Saturn, essentially. But yeah, those are just a few ideas of what the Saturn time cube theory is. It goes a lot deeper than that. There are a lot of Reddit threads that stem into like the depths of what it could possibly be. But yeah.
Yeah. Because like to touch on L, it says Northwest Semitic deity, and the translation of that word in the Semitic languages means God. So
yeah, precisely.
And then you sent me that Nick Reddit thread when I was on holiday back in August, before we started this whole adventure, and I didn't know about the time about a Saturn-Moon Matrix. I read it and I thought that was pretty interesting, and I already knew about Saturn being Satan, because again, the Saturn time cube, Satan being the god of time. The Abrahamic religions use the devil as a character to represent the planet Saturn. And of course, in that story, he seduces humans into sin. When you look back into ancient Mesopotamia, sin is the moon god, hence why, when you look into maths and the moon cycles over the last 28 days, it looks exactly like a sine wave, and a sine is specifically short for sin. That's why in the calculator you have sin in there. So, that whole Abrahamic religion story with Satan and sin all stems back to the Saturn-Moon Matrix.
It's all a lot of allegorical referencing.
Mm-hmm.
It really is interesting, like all these different symbols and words and the things that we co-opt, and we don't even realize we're using them, and they just pop up in our day-to-day, and we don't actually go to dig like what they actually stem from, like where is the original meaning of this, like where is it derived?
Yeah, because people take things as face value. They see a book that says this, they automatically believe in it and not question it. This whole reality's got to be questioned. We've got to this point now by questioning our reality, understanding that this matrix is perhaps run by Saturn and the moon. Saturn more most than the moon, but the moon definitely has a role to play in the waters, the tides, because I believe that the moon is magnetic. It attracts the water. That perhaps explains why we're all lunatic. Why not I say not all lunatic, but the feeling of lunatic comes from the fact that the word lunar is the Latin word for moon, and it's pretty crazy that these words, they have etymology that relate to the moon. Yeah, of course, the moon, there is some connection with the female aspect of it. The 13 moon cycles and the cycle relating to the menstrual cycle, though that can be related to Venus as well, because Venus is more tied to fertility instead of the moon. But it is a real leader in terms of, you got the lunar calendar, which is used in Islam, hence why they worship the moon. You see the crescent moon a lot in the mosques, which I read earlier that the crescent moon perhaps represents Saturn. So it's another story that this whole Saturn-Moon Matrix reality that we're in is true. So
I think like I was looking at the sky the other day. I came out of my house. I was going to the gym, I think, or something like that. I was just looking at the moon, and obviously when it's not full moon, sometimes it looks like devil horns, which is quite interesting. So obviously, if you were to paint a picture of what the devil was represented by, like a planet or the moon that has been eclipsed, does present like the idea of horns. It does look like devil horns. There always seems to be reference to horns. Yeah, well, have you ever had a look at the moon? It's not a full moon, it's a crescent moon. When it's a crescent moon, it's on the side, it looks like devil horns. Do you know what I mean? It looks very much like devil horns. Yeah. As well, if you have a look at a lot of, if you had a look at, say, like ancient Egypt, and you had a look at the goddesses such as Isis. So Isis is represented by are you familiar what she looks like, Isis? So she has like the sun on her head, essentially, and it looks like it's eclipsed. That could be reference to the eclipse. I do think there's like a lot of governance from eclipses. I do think the planets have a lot to do with like the reality, and it's almost like to dictate what's going on in this reality to a sense, and the eclipse has a lot of significance of what's going on. I think it could similarly link to, say, what we were talking about last week with Graham Hancock, and you have the serpent swallowing the sun. I think symbology such as the horns with the sun could also link to the idea that the sun is going to get swallowed by something, whether that's the moon, whether the moon isn't some sort of being or thing that can almost engulf the sun, or it's just it just appears that way, because going back thousands of years, potentially they would have seen the planets battling in the sky. Things like Kronos swallowing its children, could that be reference to the fact that it's swallowing its moons, it's swallowing other planets? There is, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there is another theory that I read where it's similar to the Saturn time cube, but it's the idea that Saturn was almost the sun previously of this. It was the sun of this solar system at one point, and the actual sun we've got now is almost an imposter. And the reason there's so much worship and representation of Saturn that just comes up through symbolism and things like that is because Saturn was once upon a time our god. Essentially, it gave birth to the solar system as we see it now. And the reason you have a lot of reference to like beings fighting in the sky like Kronos and Zeus and things like that is because that's reference to the planets, and the planets were shifting and moving about, and to our ancient ancestors that basically looked like gods fighting in the sky. And the reason there's a lot of worship of Saturn today is almost like a desperate attempt to get Saturn to come back to being our god, essentially. And that's why, as I say, like it being called El, which is God, like there still is a lot of ideology surrounding Saturn being our original god, basically.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like with the solar eclipse, right? You have different types. You have the partial and the total. And I think there's another one as well. And like the total one is really fascinating. Like you mentioned, the snake swallowing the sun. Is like the sun is completely covered by the moon. It's the moon is perhaps Lucifer. When you look at an eclipse, it's like very similar to the sigil of Lucifer. And Lucifer's the light bearer, so is the moon just taking light from the sun through a solar eclipse? But in that sense, the whole sky darkens, and the Abrahamic religions, they interchanged Lucifer and the devil, even though they're not the same character.
That's interesting. Yeah, that is really interesting. I don't know what to say after that. Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah. Well, yeah, good point. I don't know. I can follow up on that. Let me think.
Yeah, because like if you look at Lucifer, right, he's known as the morning star, but obviously that could tie into the sun. In Greek mythology, his character is tied to Venus, which wouldn't make sense because Venus is tied with fertility, but then there's a lot of similarities between the moon and Venus, so maybe it's just both in a sense.
Maybe both are governing the reality.
Yeah.
Well, if you think potentially back a few thousand years ago, the placement of the planets were completely different to what they are now.
Yeah, and the solar systems.
Yeah. So possibly what we see now is not the same as it was 1,000 years ago, and it meant that the planets that aren't necessarily having as much of an impact on us today were. So like the moon being able to manipulate the waves and such things as menstrual cycles. What if like Venus was in closer proximity of the Earth a few thousand years ago, and it had a lot of effects as well at the same time? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
because like when we read myths from thousands of years ago, we don't expect Earth to be the same 1,000 years ago than it is now. It wouldn't make sense.
No.
So obviously we have to look at it from what Earth was like then, like they did in ancient Apocalypse with the formation of Earth and the sea levels rising to falling and all of that. But obviously, we weren't alive thousands of years ago, so we have to give an approximation of what it was like and what the solar system was like to get the most accurate rendition of this matrix.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing as well. Speaking of the theory I was talking about with Saturn being the god of this solar system at one point, the theory does propose that essentially there was a gate, almost like a link between. So, are you familiar with? Have you seen Thor, the film Thor?
I may have, yeah.
Yeah. So in that film, there's a bridge between the different planets or the different realms, as they call them.
Yes.
The idea is that there was one point a bridge between us and the other planets, and it formed like a direct. So you could just walk across it, so you could travel between the different realms, and the highest realm was Saturn. And basically, at one point, Saturn left our orbit, and it basically caused a cataclysm. When it did, it broke a firmament, essentially. So in the Bible, you have the talk of the firmament, which led to the deluge, and which is talked about with Noah and stuff in the Noah's Ark. And essentially, the idea is that the firmament was broke by Saturn, leaving our proximity, basically. So when it left, it basically just caused a ripple and a destruction, and that's what led to the Great Deluge of the Ice Age, which is referenced by Graham Hancock.
Makes sense. That's interesting because there's something similar with Norse mythology where you have the serpent, the Ouroboros. There's a Nordic name for it. I won't be able to pronounce it. There's like a rainbow bridge connecting the two planets. So it's quite clear where the directors of Thor got their ideas from.
Yeah. And then you have the reference to the Rainbow Bridge in Wizard of Oz. Films like that.
Do you really?
Yeah. And also with CERN, that could possibly be an attempt to create that bridge again and mean we can travel between the realms.
That's a great theory.
But perhaps instead of traveling between realms, we're almost traveling in terms of planets, we're traveling between realities.
What, astral travel, or in what sense?
What in what sense of traveling between realities or realms?
Realities is in if they do exist, parallel possibilities and parallel universes, essentially. Yeah.
That idea is theorized by, well, it's not theorized, but it's represented in films like Spider-Verse, where you have them traveling between different universes and bringing in different realities, basically.
Yeah, you have the multiverse.
Who knows if they are realities or they're just realms? What is the idea of the parallel universe? Is it just different realms coexisting at the same time and not parallel universes running alongside each other?
I mean, I personally think a parallel universe is the exact same as this one, just with different things. It's you look into maths, a parallel line is something that has the same properties, but just the whole thing is the same, just with different package.
Yeah, true. There's an episode of Futurama. I don't know if you watched Futurama before.
No, I've never watched it.
Matt Groening made it. So, guy who made Simpsons, who people believe he is a Freemason, high-ranking Freemason, and that's why he's able to predict like a lot of things that are going on in the world. But basically, there's an episode in that where there's a yellow box, and basically the crew. So there's like 5 people. I don't know if you're familiar with the characters of Futurama.
No.
At all. Basically, it's set in the year 3000, but there's like a professor, like a super intelligent professor who's like the grandfather of a guy who travels in time. It's quite confusing. You'd have to watch it to understand.
Yeah.
Well, it's not the grandfather, it's the grandson. But obviously, because he's going into the future, he's like older. You'd have to see it. But yeah, so essentially he's like, there's this cube in my workshop. Don't go into it. Like, don't be tempted to go into it. And then one of the characters goes into it, and she goes down, and she comes out in a parallel universe.
Crazy.
Okay, heads I look, tails I don't. Oh yeah, heads. I mean, all right then. No, I have a duty not to look. Well, then again, I promised the coin I would. Oh, it's deep. Deeper than a small box should be. Oh! Ouch! My lawyer will hear about this.
Leela, what have you done?
Nothing. What do you mean, why was I looking in the box?
I meant your hair. It's all different-y.
Bender? Is that you?
You know it, large and in charge.
Leela? Oh, there's a woman for you, always dyeing her hair instead of not looking in a box.
I didn't dye my hair. This is how I always look.
No, that's how you always look.
Oh!
This throws my entire perception of reality into question. Clone, robot, or long-lost twin? Taking all bets. I also offer video poker.
It's some guy wearing a Leela costume. Get him!
Hold it! You have this all wrong. I just fell into the box and then I fell out somehow.
You shut up, sir. No, wait. I've got it. I know what's in the box. Oh, I've been as dumb as Fry.
Am not.
It contains a parallel universe. And when you create a parallel universe, it's almost always populated by evil twins.
Now look, I am not evil. My loan officer said so.
Oh, you'd like us to believe that, wouldn't you, Leela? Or should I say, eviler?
Oh, this is awful. Somewhere there's a more evil Bender than me. I do my best, damn it.
Leela, the good Leela, I want you to snoop around the other universe and find out how evil they are. Here.
I tell you, they're not evil. But don't be confused. They are jerks.
So it's like the idea of the cube being almost a transportation point between the realms and being able to pop out at different points. So yeah, and there's, I don't know if have you seen the film Interstellar?
No, I've not seen it.
Oh, you need to watch this stuff. You need to watch Interstellar.
Yeah, definitely. That's on my bucket list.
So in Interstellar, Matthew McConaughey's character, he wants to go and find his daughter and change the circumstances of what previously happened. And to do that, he travels into deep space, like really deep space. And he finds a portal, like a wormhole, that takes him into almost a tesseract. So like a cube. And then through there, he's able to travel, like astral travel, back down to the point where he wanted to go to. So he's essentially like skipping through time. And it creates the effects that he wants to happen, so that the time loop can continue happening, essentially.
Oh, yeah.
It's a really good film. So it's basically like he is the thing that is forcing the time loop. So it creates a continuous loop in time, basically, by him going to that exact point in space and creating that thing that happened in the past. So he's creating the thing that happened in the past. And you see that thing at the start of the film. but it's said that like his daughter has like a ghost in her room.
Yeah.
And it turns out that it's Matthew McConaughey like toying with the reality essentially by going back in time and through a tesseract to create what happens in the future.
I'll watch it for sure. You know, and just you mentioned the time, obviously different cultures have different ways of showing the representation of time. You have the Ouroboros, I said earlier, that comes in either as a figure eight, just like infinity, the maths way of representing it, you know, the snake biting its own tail, representing destruction and rebirth, which looks like is happening at this moment with the Great Reset on the world stage. And obviously, like we done an episode on the World Cup, didn't we? A lot of symbolism.
Yeah. Well, essentially, the symbol for the World Cup was the Ouroboros. Just on its side. Well, I think it was. It was just genuinely Ouroboros. I can't remember if it actually had a snake's head in it. Did it?
I don't think so.
Am I making that up? Is that like a Mandela effect? I'm sure I remember seeing it with a snake. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it didn't.
Yeah. Well, obviously, it had
there was like a partition where it looked like there would be a snake head, if that makes sense.
Really?
Well, yeah. Let me have a look. Let me pull that up. Pull it up, Jamie.
Let's see.
Pull it up, Jamie.
If it does look like a snake, then I mean, I'm not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised, but like obviously, it has the figure eight, and 8 represents the planet Saturn, which I mean, you know, it's pretty crazy. And like,
yeah,
even in the tarot, if you look into the tarot, there's the world card, and that has obviously the Ouroboros biting its own tail. It's the 21st card, and in numerology, the word Saturn is 21, the word script is 21, the word truth is 21 too. So
yeah,
the word.
Did you just say about the world being the 21st tarot card as well?
Yes, the 21st.
Yeah. Also, that leads me to a point. I did a decode on the album Donda last year. Donda is the 10th studio album by Kanye West, for people that don't know what it is. But the album cover is a black cube. So you have the reference to the cube there as well. And let me try and find the information for what I did with the decode now, because I did it quite a while ago. I did like a full-on PowerPoint about it. Did I do it on Google Docs or did I do it on...
Do you want to share your screen?
No, actually, yeah, maybe, possibly. Just give me a second. I'm trying to see if I can find it first. But for the World Cup, I was just looking. At the top of the symbol of the World Cup 2022, it does look like there's like sort of they've done it so it looks like the flag's been waved down essentially, so it looks like a bit of winds hit it, but it would be where the snake's head would be. So I guess you could interpret that as a snake's head if you looked at it in like a different way, and like it looks like there's almost an eye of the snake and it's engulfing the next bit of the ribbon. Right, Google Docs, like have a look.
Yeah, and obviously with the World Cup, obviously the final was during Saturnalia.
Yeah, true, and it was one day after the Pope's birthday, who famously has a staff with the
two serpents.
Symbolism on it. Yeah, with the 2 serpents, and then there's the pine cone at the top, which I referenced earlier with Christmas, and the reference to Saturnalia.
Yeah.
Where did I do this now?
The 2 serpents represent the magnetism that runs this reality, because we're in an electromagnetic universe. You know, when the Bible talks about Satan reducing people into sin, it's based off magnetism. Yeah. Because we are magnetic beings.
Let me try and find this now.
But yeah, Donda. I'll probably have to
listen here we go.
All right, you got it.
So I found it, yeah.
All right. Are you able to share your screen or?
Yeah, I'll have a go. So, for what I did, it's quite a long decode, to be fair. So, Donda Decoded. So, the first thing I did was search the digits of pi to find out where the what was it? I was looking for 21. Donda and Saturn match in the Chaldean. That's the first point I made. And then, let's have a look. I've got a lot here. Obviously, that's reference to the world card. So, like coming into the world, into this reality, and you have the Ouroboros surrounding the world card.
Yeah.
And 21 is the 8th prime, I believe. And Kanye West was born on the 8th of June, and you have it as the 8th prime, and it must be the 6th triangular number, I believe.
Yeah, that's a 6. Yeah, it's 6.
Yeah. So you have all these references here to 14. You have Kanye, God, Saturn. Obviously, Kanye's changed his name to Ye as well, which is another name for God.
Oh, is he actually?
Yeah.
This guy.
I believe it's short for Yahweh.
Might be.
This has been so long since I've done this. Obviously, like you have the prison planet and the 2 pillars, 3.14. You have Alice falling into the hole in Alice in Wonderland, which is quite interesting as well, because you have the rabbit. When you were talking about the moon, you have what looks like a rabbit on the moon. For people that haven't seen that, you should look that up. Like, look at the shape that's formed by the craters on the moon, and it almost looks like a rabbit. You can grab a pair of binoculars and look at it, and make out the points. If you draw the points, it'll look like a rabbit. But it's interesting that we're in the era of the rabbit right now, going down the rabbit hole.
It's like in Chinese astrology. There's a myth surrounding the moon rabbit, actually.
Yeah, we have all the references to the rabbit shows up everywhere, doesn't it?
Yes.
Following the white rabbit down the hole. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm getting a bit gassy here. If for people that can see this, I'm just going very slowly. I'm trying to work back from what I've done. You had a lot of reference to Prison Planet with Donda dying on the 12th of July, and such as another name for Saturn is the Black Sun, and the name Donda West equals 39 in Chaldean, which is the same as the Black Sun. And Ye equals 6 in Chaldean, which is another name for God, as I said, and the 6th chakra. We did make reference to it in the podcast with Gio. We were talking about the planets potentially being a macro version of the chakra system.
Yeah,
but
it's all in sevens.
And in that way, Saturn would be the 6th chakra, which is the third eye chakra, and that references coming out as 6 in Chaldean, basically. But I think for the most point, you have Donda, like the album cover and things, being the black cube, and you have the black cube at Mecca, as I said earlier, and the black cube in the UN meditation room. Also, as well, it's interesting that. Sorry, how do I stop sharing my screen? Stop sharing. There we go.
Okay, got it.
So there's a song by Kanye West called Heaven and Hell, where he talks about like the split between heaven and hell, essentially. But for the music video, there's a point where Kanye is in the middle and he's dressed in all black and he's being surrounded by people spinning around in a ring formation. And they're essentially ascending. Basically, they all start ascending up. And from the first point, they're all staring at the phones. The phone is essentially the black mirror. It's the black cube. It's the technology. Is that telling us that the black cube is this of the same ilk? It is the technology, and this is what the reality is. We're living inside that cube, that technology. Like the black screen essentially represents nothingness. It's the void, isn't it?
Yes.
So it's what reality would be birthed from, and we'd be coming out of that. But we're all always tied back, and we're always linked back to that black cube through things such as like telephones and computers. And there's the TV show Black Mirror, if you've seen that. Have you seen Black Mirror?
I think I've seen one, but I gotta start. I don't watch a lot of TV, man. I gotta get back to it. I think I saw one episode.
Yeah, fair enough. It's a very good show if you get a chance to watch it. You should put it on the list, on the ever-growing list.
Put it on the list.
Put it on the list of 5,000 different films and TV shows that I'm never going to get through. But basically the idea of that, like the premise of the Black Mirror is like looking at our reflection and seeing like what the darkest possible realities could come out as through using future technologies like dystopian futures. So there's just a lot of references to black cubes, and I think that has a link to technology and potentially what this reality is.
Yeah, like let's go back to Earth in a bit, and he has two tropics, right? The Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. And like I said earlier in the start, Cancer is ruled by the moon, and then you have Capricorn that's ruled by the Saturn. I was going to say moon, but it's ruled by Saturn. Again, the trilogy, once again, the Saturn and the moon. You know, Ron, I'll ask you this question. You know, you have Capricorn, right? Have you ever had a Caprisun?
Yeah, love them. They're well nice.
Yeah, they're unbelievable drinks, but why did that company name these drinks Caprisun? It's just very funny. It's just funny to me.
Yeah. Well, so you're saying because Capricorn is ruled by Saturn that it's making like a joke about, because potentially Saturn is our sun originally.
Yeah, maybe that German drink company putting the truth in plain sight.
Yeah, possibly. There is also another theory. It's like a even deeper theory. If you keep going down the rabbit hole, is that the idea of this being a whole psyop, where the Saturn-Moon Matrix essentially is like being drip fed into the masses, into the mind and the masses through such things as symbolism and conspiracy theories, so that we will accept their religion of worshipping Saturn, which is Satan, basically, or the new god. It's quite interesting to ponder.
Yeah, it
One
is.
massive psyop.
The conspiracy theory trial is a psyop within itself. You know, people give too much of their attention to symbolism and all of that. It's unnecessary.
Yeah.
Like, look at something else for once, you know?
Yeah. But it's so interesting to talk about. It's like where all this symbolism comes from. Who knows?
Yeah.
Are they drip feeding it? So we think we're onto something, and then slowly we become indoctrinated into their religion because we believe it more and more. It's really hard to say.
Yeah.
It's either that or that is the true reality. But obviously, I think we are big proponents of the idea that this is sort of like a simulation of sorts, or like a Russian doll of just going down in different layers of simulation.
Most definitely. It's like you even have the Tropic of Cancer, right? It's like, why is the biggest world disease on the world stage named after the zodiac sign in astrology? I can't wrap my head around that.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. That's really interesting, isn't it? And it's ruled by the moon as well, which is possibly the arbiter of the reincarnation process, thing that keeps us coming back over and over again. So, in that theory, Saturn would be the governance of time, and the moon would be the thing that governs us whilst we're in this reality, essentially, and keeps us coming back, keeps us stuck.
Yeah, because you have the sine wave in mathematics; it keeps going on and on and on.
Yeah,
it's infinity.
And you do have a lot of links to like infinity coming out nowadays.
Infinity War.
Infinity War, yeah, Infinity War, exactly. Like a war that's just ongoing constantly. And like music and things like that, there's a lot of reference to that. Forever, just going on, looping. Like one of my favorite albums at the minute, JID, The Forever Story, that has a lot of symbolism towards the 8 and the Ouroboros. It's called The Forever Story, obviously. It's talking about forever and a lot of it. I don't know. It's just really fascinating. There's all these links to forever. And even Chris Brown, one of Chris Brown's biggest songs is called Forever. And I saw a thread the other day where it was talking about how Chris Brown was posting Saturn symbolism and Saturn worship essentially on his Instagram, talking about like Saturn being a previous god and us worshipping Saturn, basically.
Women were told to listen to their god, the Lord of the Rings, so they were wearing an ear ring. Men were to get married before Saturn, their god, so they would wear a wedding ring. Consequently, the king would be crowned before Saturn. Saturn would be the round crown of the corona, the ring. We know that Saturn was referred to as El, E-L. El is a name that was given to the planet Saturn. And therefore, if you are worshiping Saturn, you represent the law. You are referred to in church today as an elder. How did you get to be an elder? You got to be an elder because you were one of the elites. How did you get to be an L lead? You got L elected because through L elections, all of our system is based on occult, mystical words and terms going back to the planet Saturn, going back to the Phoenician Canaanite system of banking.
That made me laugh, that did, it's just, it's just one of those things, the masses, what are they thinking now, that this celebrity is now showing occult symbolism.
It was wide, in the wide open. It wasn't like hidden or anything like that. It was just posting it for the world to see. It was posting like big clips and things of them talking about Saturn symbolism. But are they just using people like that to almost confirm people's suspicions, like conspiracy theories suspicions, to then get them like to believe in like Saturn worship and things like that? I don't know.
What's so essential?
Them essentially.
Oh yeah, perhaps
to make them think that they're onto something.
Yeah, this matrix, man, it's full of tricks.
Yeah.
When you try to figure something out and for it to not be true, it's the whole notion of this game.
But I'm almost coming to the realization that like nothing is true. Like it's what you put your energy and your focus towards. Like you can really manifest what you want in this reality because it is so malleable. Like whatever, if everyone fervently believed that the creation story was true, then it would be true. If that makes sense.
100%.
So truth is completely malleable. It's not a fixed thing. That's why you can have such different opinions about like political leanings. I don't think there is one truth. I think the one truth is that there's no truth. I think that's what the truth is.
That's very deep.
It's like what I think Socrates said, the quote something like, I only know that I don't know. So it's the idea that you don't know anything.
You don't know anything, yeah. Yeah, that's like, when you have awakenings and you essentially unlearn everything that you've been indoctrinated in during your childhood and early adulthood.
Unless then you basically learn that you don't know anything at that point.
It's unbelievable.
It's really fascinating. It's really fascinating. But then I think that's part of the reality's mechanism. I think the reality's mechanism to keep you trapped, in a sense, is to make it as confusing as possible. It's like the room of mirrors. Like it just goes on forever. It just doesn't stop.
Yeah.
And it's just impossible to pinpoint what the actual truth is. I'm not saying there isn't a definitive truth about where we are, but I think it's just, I don't know, it's really hard to pinpoint what it is. And it's just complete, it shapeshifts all the time. It leads you astray very well, very effectively. I think that's the point of it.
Mm-hmm. It's like, you sent me this other album by this artist called Quadeca, and he has a song title called Cassini's Division. And what's funny is that in astronomy, it's a region between Saturn's rings. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. Were there any like symbolism behind this guy's lyrics? It seems like it from what I've read.
Well, the idea of the album is that it's a ghost that's passed on to the next life. It's basically talking from the perspective of the dead person looking back on the people he cares about from that position. So he's basically, it's like the opposite of grieving, because he's grieving the living instead of the dead, essentially. But that song is, so there's a song before it called Fractions of Infinity, where he basically like realizes like that everything is one and he's part of the all on a bigger scale, and is like at peace with being dead, essentially. But yeah, then Cassini's division is where he's beyond Saturn's rings, and obviously we've been talking about. But like, why is there always the choice of Saturn?
Yeah,
I don't know. Is that a conscious decision? Or is it like something that we lean towards on a subconscious level because we know there is some truth between us and Saturn? That being our original like point of arrival.
Yeah, it's like we know these the elites use these celebrities as puppets to give the truth, Well,
he's not even a celebrity, really. It's not that big.
Oh, is he not?
Like a no, he's only like a YouTube rapper. I think he's only got like 200,000 followers or something like that. It's not massive.
Oh, is he not? Oh, fair enough.
No.
He's not sold out yet.
Yeah. Although I think his dad is quite high up in big tech.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So there's a possibility that he knows a lot of knowledge that the masses don't.
Yeah, it knows, like with technology now, that's in the age we're in, the age of Aquarius again, traditionally ruled by Saturn. Yep. Or Saturn again. You know, it gets boring at this rate.
Yeah.
It's like, sorry to go back to football. Do you know how, like, the iconic Balotelli celebration where he goes, "Why always me?" It's like, why always Saturn? And that's what I'm
Why always me? What have I done? Yeah, just to come back to Cassini's division as well. Sorry.
Yeah.
Very quickly, the song. It's almost like Quadeca, because he's accepted that he's died, and I don't think at that point he's come to the conclusion that he doesn't want to come back. He's just going to accept that he's one with all, and like he's happy to be non-existent, basically. But he goes past Saturn's rings and he's essentially returning to where he came from. Also, there's a lyric in the song where it's what is it now? It's something along the lines of the stars would rather be left alone to be in the dark. No. It's to do with the sky wants to be black, but it's robbed of that by the stars. So essentially, it's the idea that we want to return to nothingness, but we can't because of the things that's keeping us tied into this reality, basically.
Yeah.
Like we want to be at peace, but it's very difficult to be.
Yeah, that's very deep from that man. He knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, and he's returning to like the blackness of whatever this reality stems from.
So you obviously you mentioned the black and the black cube, the black hole. No, it's not black hole, but it's just I've mentioned it now. But the black hole thing that's talked about in physics. Do you think that's connected to Saturn? I mean, I've not looked much into the theory of the black hole and the Big Bang, but I remember learning at it at school and thinking that it's all false, which it probably is because, God was created from nothing in religion and the universe was created out of nothing in science. So it's all the same thing, really. And we know the governing ruler of all of this is Saturn. So it's just...
I'm really not sure. Yeah. It's really hard to say. It's all theoretical, but the black hole could be something that pulls us into nothingness, maybe. And that is like the same premise of where this reality is birthed from. It's birthed from nothing. It's birthed from blackness.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. It's all theoretical.
It is. And just to go back to that Balotelli celebration, this is where Sinks just come in. Obviously, he done it against Man United, the Red Devils, Satan being the devil, which is Saturn. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up.
Yeah, that is true, to be fair. Yeah.
So why does this happen? But when you're aware of these things, Sinks just come naturally.
Yeah, they just pop up all over the place. So it's really weird. It's really weird.
Yeah. Anything else you got in your head about the Saturn-Moon Matrix?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head. No. I don't know if you'd probably be interested in this. I think I sent you a link. Basically, I found something talking about, we were talking about the Book of the Dead in Egypt the other day.
Yes.
The Egypt podcast. So you have Osiris in the corner, who's like the arbiter, is the judger of the life, basically. And he decides if someone can join him in the afterlife or basically be decimated. He is sat on a cube.
Okay.
And I'm not 100% sure how it works, but it's a four-sided cube, but it divides into 5, and it has some link to phi.
Yeah, because
this guy proposes.
Yeah, if you look at the equation of the golden ratio, it's 1 plus root 5 divided by 2. So yeah, that makes sense.
There you go. I'll send you the link, and you could probably understand it a lot better than I could. But basically, that's supposed to be representative of the cycle of death and rebirth. And it's really interesting that they chose to use cubes.
Yeah. And obviously,
representation of what is sat on.
Yeah, we know the myth of Osiris as well, death and regeneration, the resurrection. Obviously, similar to that of the Jesus character.
Yeah.
Into allegorical.
I know Osiris being the wife of the wife, the husband of Isis, brings us full circle from the start of the podcast as well.
Yeah.
Quite interesting.
Everything goes back. Infinity.
Forever. There we go. There's the link. There's the Ouroboros. There's the
There we go. So, I'm presuming that's it. Have you got anything?
I think we could close out the podcast there, yeah.
Yeah. Now you know the true Matrix. Actually, one thing, before we finish.
I'll go on, yeah.
How do we escape this Matrix, this Saturn-Moon Matrix? If this is the Saturn-Moon Matrix, how do we escape it?
We destroy Saturn.
Is that the phone calling?
I think so, but...
Is that Satan?
Literally just stopped as soon as I took my headphones off. That was weird.
Yes, we know the phone is... the phone is Saturn, man. Samsung Galaxy.
Trying to call me. Don't destroy me. Don't blow me up. But I'm not sure. I'm really not sure how it is. I think the way to escape the Matrix is to accept that we are, like I said, is to live in neutrality and understand that you don't know anything.
Yeah.
I think that's partially how to escape.
Yeah, I think to avoid the reincarnation loop, it's effectively to detach from everything. Me personally, I'll do that when I'm in my 70s. I still want to live life.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was saying that to Sylvia on other podcasts, weren't I?
Yeah.
You were saying it's like living like the Cathars. I think that's the best way to escape. I think essentially this reality is remembering who we are and like where we came from.
Yeah, because we come in, right, we indoctrinated with nonsense, and then some people see an awakening and realize that they have to escape this matrix and not come back again. Not the term that the self-proclaimed top G says it, but understanding the truth, understanding the deeper layers behind this matrix, not just what you see in the movies. We've not even mentioned archons and the demiurge and that. There's so many layers.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about.
Yeah, it's pretty insane.
Yeah, the top G says that sort of stuff's just materialistic.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is a good way to establish freedom and be free from the constraints of the elites and stuff. But on a metaphysical level, it's quite useless and probably detrimental.
Physical freedom, but spiritual detachment. That's Tate's philosophy. But the youths, they don't understand. We can escape them physical matrix in what Tate says, but you're free in a closed system, not understanding the deeper layers behind it all. The only way is to understand the truth, the real truth behind it. And like you said, the truth perhaps is that there is no such truth. So
put that on my gravestone.
Yeah. So detaching from everything is perhaps the way to transcend into the best dimension that the universe has to offer. So guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope you took value from this for those that are unaware of the notion of a Saturn-Moon Matrix. And, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you another time.
Peace. Oh.